So, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and good night, everyone, depending on which part of the world you're joining us from today. I'm Ale Esquerro. I'm product manager of the Nuke timeline tools, and I'm very excited to be here introducing this live event of compositing review and shot tracking with Nuke Studio. This is how Nuke Studio's review tools integrate into a production workflow alongside shot tracking database, also known as flow production tracking or ShotGrid or Shotgun. It's changing a lot lately, but this is how we know it now. And today we're going to have a talk with Will Harris, who is our senior product manager of Nuke Timeline Tools, and Josh Bretag, who is the pipeline creative specialist. And here they are.
Hello.
Hi everyone.
Hey, thanks for having us. Yeah, I'm excited to show you some of the cool things that Josh has built, integrated into a sort of a tour of the timeline tools from a production tracking and pipelining perspective.
Yeah, looking forward to showing everyone kind of being able to update notes and annotations and pull data from ShotGrid/Flow into your timeline and review it.
So without further ado, let's have a look at that tour. Let's watch that video, and then we'll come back for some Q&A. Let's start here in Flow Production Tracking, previously known as ShotGrid. We know many of you use this tool to show your detailed status on every entity in your project, from asset, shot, production stage, plate, render, re-render, versions and versions and versions throughout the life cycle of your project. We also know you need your artists tools, or DCCs, connected to this via pipelined integrations, and that's exactly what this presentation is all about. Here we see all the ingested plates or camera shot footage for the VFX project PT Anna, thanks to Peter Timberlake. Now in an animation project, this could include storyboards, animatics, or initial production renders ready to be assembled into an edit or cut. In order to assemble or conform an edit, I'm using Hiero, our timeline tool set tailored to VFX editors. This is a Nuke family product, sharing viewers, readers, color management with Nuke, and having some NLE type features like EDL import, a conform spreadsheet view that I'm using to connect to my high resolution imagery, and the ability to do a confidence or conform accuracy check with a multi-track sequence, where I can compare a reference with my stack of build elements that I'm getting ready to hand off to a compositor. This shot distribution workflow can build a templated starter Nuke script with time offsets, framing decisions, annotations, and even lens undistortion, already prepped for my Nuke compositing friends. So as creative work continues on any project, renders are made and versions are created in your production tracking database. And feedback is given, thus more revisions made, and by the time you're in the middle of the project, the cycle of review is in full swing. Lots of information about the state of your project now lives in the status fields, comments, and annotations that vendors, producers, supervisors, and even creative key stakeholders may have contributed to your shot tracking system. To load review playlists from Flow Production Tracking right into Nuke Studio, Hiero, or Hiero Player, I'm going to show you this example integration of a loader panel, annotation viewer, and more. Without having to go to a web page, I simply log in, and this panel shows me projects and content I'm authenticated to view. And by browsing this simple structure, I can now see film strip, thumbnails of anything. Individual versions, playlists, and cuts could be loaded from here. There's choices of how to access the media, from linking to my own EXR images on a shared server, or perhaps I need to localize or download some or all of the versions based on my connectivity. Choosing a load option builds me a sequence populated with color-coded shots exhibiting important status information translated into Hiero Player's visual tag system. In this playlist, I'm doing technical checks on some super accurate rotoscoping to be used in the shots I'm working on. Whilst Hiero Player's wipe and compare tools are critical, Just as critical is my ability to communicate back through this panel, status, notes, and even annotations about what I'm receiving. Once I've viewed and updated notes on everything, I can bulk send my responses back to production tracking. But first with this opportunity to check my work in this change report. Now I'm loading a playlist of various artist comps, including mine. In our example, multiple annotations from Flow can show up as freeze frames above the versions in my review playlist. This makes a very obvious to-do list for reviewers. I could delete the track items as I address them, disable them to see through to the comp render, and perhaps collapse the tracks to save vertical space. Notes and annotations are also loaded on demand in the panel, lower left, and can be enlarged to full screen anytime you need them. Changing the status of a shot is another important piece of communication that can be done here from inside the artist environment, as well as sending a note telling them, I got it. Here on shot 170, I'm getting instructions to match a similar shot's sky. Since the other shot is rendered, I can import a frame, overlay it on my multi-track timeline, and use the annotation grab feature to send back to production proof and confidence that we are talking about the same thing. Once this VFX review session is complete, again, I can bulk send my responses back to production tracking with the opportunity to check my work in this change report. Cycling through versions in the timeline is another great way to see progress and keep everyone accountable. So, here in Nuke Studio, you can see the project after many iterations, with cut-to-time versions laid out by delivery date to allow us to see what's approved and any pending approvals. I'm using my A/B compare buffers to compare any of my approved comp tracks with the original backplate in a vertical split. Playing through or fast playing like this allows a flexible way to see a lot of stuff. As you might have guessed, the red items are still not approved. So I'll go back to the loader and grab the latest versions. This last two shots looks hopeful. I can see right here that one's approved and the other is still pending review. One last problem. The skies are just still not right on shot 140. It needs more clouds, or was it less clouds? Since I'm in Nuke Studio, I can dig all the way into the full comp script and make a change. In Nuke Studio, you have the full power of Nuke X right at your fingertips, as well as our full suite of timeline tools. As soon as it's rendered, I'll see the revision and can satisfy even the most demanding stakeholder. All right, welcome back. So we're going to do some Q&A time now. Hope you enjoyed the little demo there. But Josh is really the mastermind behind all this. So we want to dive in to his loader that you saw there. It's really way more than a loader, right? I mean, it's a annotation syncer. It's a way of connecting your own notes and status adjustments back into the production tracking database. But let's dive into what we saw, Josh.
So
how did the idea come up?
So when I was working in studios, the kind of thing that always fell to the bottom of the list was, you know, let's get a good review system going where there'd always be creative needs and things like that. So coming to Foundry, I really wanted to focus on some of those things. And at SIGGRAPH, we kind of built a prototype and started kind of seeing how studios want to get that information into their review system. And from there, it just kind of evolved.
And what exactly does it do if we break it down in a sort of more technical steps?
Yeah, so it creates a static manifest, essentially, of the information that's within ShotGrid and Flow, and then operates kind of separate from ShotGrid and Flow until you do that change report upstream. Essentially, the idea is that I wanted everyone to be able to not have to have a side window open or anything like that with Flow in it, so that you could actually do all of your work from one DCC and still have that look and feel that everyone's familiar with.
Right, not having to leave to a web browser, but having just a sort of a dockable panel inside your main artist app, right? In this case,
yeah, 100%. Yep.
Great. And what would you say are the sort of the features that stand out that people should know about? I mean, I went through it quickly there, but there's quite a lot to it, and some extra features that maybe are just worth calling out, right?
Yeah, for sure. Let's jump through a few of my slides, and we can go through the features there. Are we sharing the slides now? I presume we are. So let's jump to the feature list. So initially, I wanted a really performant system. And I understand that ShotGrid can be kind of, if you try and pull too much information, you're going to have a lot of slowdowns and things like that. So I built it in such a way that it's a lazy load system. I want to be able to modify it and work with studios to kind of customize how their process is as well. So a lot of studios, have much different ways of using ShotGrid. So I wanted to have something kind of scalable and easy to use there. You can multi-select playlists or cuts in this version, but that's not locked to that. We could work towards shots and sequences or even latest. The download process is multi-threaded, and you can choose how many threads that is because we don't want anyone breaking their network or internet. And I think Lawrence asked a question before that I can address as well, which is there's a concept called localization strategies. And basically, when you import some media, you can choose whether you want to direct connect to some EXRs or sequences, or whether you want to download, or even if you want to copy that to your local. It's all called localization, basically, which just kind of creates a cache, for a better word, of the information locally, so that you can get speedy reviews. So yeah, let's jump to the next slide. I wanted to keep the same look and feel. I wanted to have the ability to be able to embed Hiero annotations back up to ShotGrid into the format that ShotGrid knows and wants, and just basically make it so that it feels fairly natural to come and use this product.
Yeah,
just like using ShotGrid.
One of the things I really enjoyed using on my first impressions was the annotations appearing above the shots. I'm not sure if people noticed that, but like it was really obvious to have that sort of to-do list that you can of course delete or throw away. There's still the annotations are still linked to the shots and appear in the panel, but it's just a really easy way to see, oh look, I've got 5 things to look at or 10 things to look at in this
I can
session.
jump to an example slide for it, I think, as well. So yeah, you can see here we've got an annotation. There's a better slide for this, though, I think, the stacked one. You can choose whether or not to bring these elements in and then hide them. So you can also see which frame it relates to. But what I do is I put it for the full length of the version so that people can easily see it. If it were a single frame, it would be very hard to spot as you're going through there.
Right, which makes it show up in your main viewer, which is beautiful. But then, of course, you could, disable it once you've addressed it, written your note, whatever. But also, I see there that, as you can see up close here, the status of each individual version, the green tick for the approved, the hand up for needs review, are there. And of course, if you were to click that and say I've viewed it, it actually, in our model, in our example, changes color from green to yellow, which is really great. Nice experience.
Yeah, here's an example of the edits happening. And also, if there's a track that has multiple of the same version in it, you'll actually see that come across there as well. So you can actually quickly view all the edits and stuff to drill down to what you've changed versus what's on ShotGrid. I've also added a handy little kind of synced column to see whether or not the the localized data is equal with the shot grid data.
So I could actually see, before even loading anything, I could see the film strip, scrub any asset I wanted. That's just the film strip sort of streamed preview coming right from ShotGrid.
Yes.
And I could see there, like, those first 4 need review. Those others down there are approved. And I can see all of these elements seem to be online for me. That's the green cached. And of course, if I picked a playlist that was new, maybe, or I didn't have the renders, the versions, they'd be red until I click a button to choose to link, or if necessary, cache to image sequences, or indeed to actually download QuickTimes like ProRes if I wanted in these distributed teams that people work in. That seems really useful.
Yeah, you can mix and match as well, and basically, if you were to hand pick each of these versions, you could basically say, okay, well, I know that I need an image sequence for this bit, and I'm going to just use the ShotGrid version for this one, just to get a quick timeline built out of all of those things. So looking at these questions coming in,
yeah,
how's the local linking done? As I said before, it creates a manifest, and it's basically, for lack of a better term, it's a really lightweight JSON database like Mongo. It's not actually a database, it's just a JSON file. But it creates a bunch of entities in it that kind of have what the strategy was for each of the individual versions, and then it can mix and match to reapply to the timeline. Nuke style localization is great.
Yeah.
Yeah, so to Lawrence's question, this is not a Nuke style localization. This is actually a completely different system where you choose the folder in which you're going to be bringing all this information into. So you could actually put that on a network as well, and then do a sync review across those as well.
Another area that we might want to talk about, Josh, is the actual authentication system, which I thought was quite sort of refreshingly simple. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So
get logged in the first place.
This is a 2-part kind of strategy with this one. There's a barrier to entry when kind of getting into using anything that requires a pipeline element. And what I really wanted for this is to be able to have something that you could run without potentially having to speak to pipeline initially. And how I've managed to do that is it uses a lot of the same authentication systems as ShotGrid Toolkit and RV. However, it doesn't need the entire ShotGrid Toolkit libraries in order to operate. So it will operate in a way that will authenticate with 2FA and also the user's normal authentication, which will actually create a limited permission set for them, and they'll only be able to see data that they're actually allowed to see. Or you could use the traditional way of using an API key, which is slightly less secure because you'd have to always check who the authenticated user is.
A couple more questions there if you want to.
Yeah, let's go through the questions. Sorry, I have to look over to this other screen. I don't know whether you can see me, but
yeah, I see Jeff.
Okay,
question. Yeah, go ahead.
Let's go for Kimberly Miners. Okay. Is it possible to customize the fields that are visible in the viewers? Is that more of a Hiero question, or is that for this product? I can speak to actually, at least if it's for this, what I am creating is a the options are all hideable and studio configurable. So actually, you can actually have this set as a JSON file where it's put on storage or something like that, so each artist can't change. We also have options for custom import configurations, so if you do need particular treatments for every particular shot around color space and stuff like that, you can start to customize that area as well. You can also change the ShotGrid view, basically meaning that you can customize to shots and sequence. But beyond that, it's a very clear schema of how to actually modify this. So if you want to have different information within your tree view, I've laid it out in such a way that you can actually modify it fairly easily.
One question that I think must be coming to mind is this part of the product or versus an example, or how are we going to be delivering this offering or this functional example, Josh?
Yeah, so as a functional example, it's not tied to a release structure at all. We get to work out kind of the delivery methods for this. We're looking into some sort of repository system for it so that people can get updates. However, at the moment, I'm looking to work with some studios to kind of stress test before we'll do a release of it. And yeah, we can talk about that in a bit. There's another good question here.
Okay.
Can it load cuts from shotgun cuts? Yes, it absolutely can. And that kind of segues into this bit. By default, it's using the ShotGrid cuts. They're not exactly the best in terms of how they look. They're a single track, but I have built in kind of hooks to be able to, if you attach a EDL or an OTIO to your entity within ShotGrid, it could actually unpack that and give you a much smoother kind of workflow into those stands.
Right. That's an interesting kind of thing to think about for the future, I think. I mean, as you pointed out, playlists are pretty simple. They're just a chain of shots. Cuts are a little bit more sophisticated with cut in, cut out. I'm not sure if cuts can understand gaps if you wanted to spread out shots, but OTIOs certainly can, right? And then they can also understand transitions and multi-tracks. So if you're thinking about building OTIOs into your sort of pipeline future, then that might be one thing to think about. And then the other thing that I think we also should point out is that whilst it's not just sort of a playlist session that's ephemeral and then you throw it away, although maybe you treat playlists that way today, but don't forget that even Hiero Player, it's like a very basic NLE, a nonlinear editor, right, that can actually hold a project where you could manipulate things on your temporary timeline if you wanted, stack up playlists on top of each other to kind of have your build history if you wanted. You're not changing the source of truth of edits, but you are just kind of keeping a private project of things because you have a project. You're not just a single session software. You can kind of bring in stuff from the pipeline, but also be able to save stuff in Hiero Player or Hiero or Nuke Studio.
So I've got another really good one from Peter Vickery. Can supervisors see annotations and notes that are assigned to different artists on their team? Yes, if they've got the permission to do that within ShotGrid. So you can see in this kind of example here, I'm actually bringing in all the notes. However, if there are particular notes that are assigned to that person and they can only have the permission to see their own notes, then that's all they're going to see.
Well, that's good. And it's I particularly like the way that you can make the changes, do the screen grabs, including anything in the viewer. Even if you wanted to wipe between your old one and the new one, you could screen grab that, or draw an annotation, screen grab that. Set maybe a status change and a note, do that 20 times, and then when you go to submit, that's when the manifest, right, would sync back with the flow database. You could, I imagine, back out a change if you wanted to at this point, if you felt that it wasn't the right thing to say, or maybe you were a bit too rude in how you answered or something like that, right? So there is that chance, not instantly sent back, which is a good convention. I think it seems like it follows this kind of session way of thinking.
This absolutely stems from my time working in pipeline. If it were live linked and someone were to make a mistake and have all of that information, there's so many times that we've had to go in and mass change something like that. So I do create a safety mechanism that doesn't have a direct link with ShotGrid in that area. So a couple more really good questions. How does the media download? So it has a multitude of different ways of attaching to that media. Essentially, if you wanted to have a centralized repository for it, you could. and you could actually download all the media to that. But you can also direct link to anything that's on shared storage. So if you've got fast shared storage, you can actually choose that approach as well.
Cool. I'm not sure if there probably are more questions.
Can we hook into the pipe and grab extra LUTs for each shot when viewing EXRs? So this is why I built the custom import configuration. There can be callbacks to do this, and I would have to work with the studio probably to do a customized approach for that, but I do have a hook in this with the view that that's going to be the answer downstream. Something else I should probably note as well in terms of features is, and this is an improvement on what was in the initial video, but I now have a searchable content view. And what I'm hoping to do with this over time is have a callback or a context menu from the timeline, which basically says, okay, show me all the applicable versions for this particular thing, and then choose what your import strategy for those versions would be and how you might want to put them back on the timeline. But that's features to come.
Yeah, it's great to see that since you gave me a build like a couple of weeks ago for that video, that was my feature lock. And you wouldn't let me move to a newer build, I remember, for stability's sake. But you've still been working, and I can see that you're continuing to add stuff to this. I think that leads us into talking a bit more about the way of deploying this, where it sounds like a GitHub will probably be the place.
Yeah, GitLab or GitHub.
GitLab will be sort of an example piece of code that someone could take and within hours get connected to their Flow 샷그리드 database. But we know in reality, every production is probably going to want to take a TD or pipeline person to go from that. I mean, it's more than a foundation. It's a sort of a working example that would need to be customized to be plumbed in to exactly how the studio thinks, right? And the structure of projects.
Yeah, that's
part of your thinking, right?
That's why I've targeted initially playlists and cuts, because there is RV which currently uses these areas. They're pretty standard for most studios. I've given options for being able to look at it in a sequence and shot fashion. However, every studio does it differently, where they keep their fields for extra information. So if you've got cut timing or things like that embedded into your shots, that's where you're going to have to customize this kind of stuff as well. However, if you've got a very straight down the middle sequence approach, it's not really going to take too much to be able to bring in a full sequence if you want to.
Right, and I think that actually speaks to another reason why we started this project, right, was that we knew people, it was sort of a barrier to entry to learn the whole API of Flow to just load a playlist and figure out all the authentication. So, you've solved a lot of that here, I think, Josh, and given people a sturdy starting point to go from. I've got a couple more questions for you. One is, I think people are probably wondering, when could they have this?
The $1 million question, yes. So there's only so much we can simulate within Foundry to ensure that this is a good workflow. But the truth is, a production database in a studio is going to be really the stress test for this. So I want to work with some studios just to make sure that the approaches that I've done are stable, and then people can pretty much have it shortly after that. But it would be good to chat to people so that we can understand what your requirements are in terms of any customization that's needed as well. And I can point you in the right direction, essentially.
Right. So you're certainly looking for some partnerships, but as people can see, I mean, this will definitely work for a proof of concept to try out and get connected, and then we want to know what else people need, I guess, and how they might want to customize it themselves and learn to fish, so to speak, to take it from there. We will put a link in this video to allow people to show interest in the description of the video. You should see that, maybe even in the chat. to tell us if you want to partner with us, if you want to get early access, and try this out, and tell us, if we've missed anything. One more thing, Josh. You've shown us kind of current features and your latest features. Is there further stuff that you want to do with this that you'd like to do in the coming months?
I think, well, in the coming years, maybe. Let's see. The other goal, I think, is really to tighten up the initial ingest into 샷그리드. I think that's a point where a lot of studios potentially suffer when they're getting daily content in, or they're getting content from another studio even. They want to have their editors be a bit more powerful in that workflow, where potentially if they know what all the shots or animatics are, that could actually drive the structure of 샷그리드 in a lot of ways, and it's more closely tied to the edit, instead of potentially having producers create your all your entities within 샷그리드. You could actually have it the other way around, where you've got a fairly solid edit, and then you can go back up to 샷그리드 with that content. So creating cuts that then could potentially create 샷그리드 assets, it needs a lot of vetting and stuff to make sure that that's a good approach, but I'd be kind of looking at doing something like that in the future, maybe.
Very cool. All right, I'm not sure if there's any other questions we want to make sure we cover in the time. We can move on and look at some what's next for Nuke roadmap stuff in a few minutes. But is there anything else you see there, Josh, that you'd like to answer?
I think we've covered off most. Yeah. As you said, let's start talking to some people and start testing with studios.
Great. So then I will share my screen, if I may.
It's all yours.
Thank you. And we'll have a look at a bit of what's next for the Nuke timeline tools. So we were working there in version 15.1, but we, of course, are working on new stuff in the timeline tools area. Specifically to do with review, I think you should see that we're sort of actively investing in review, and we've got some pipeline tools being built as well. But in terms of features inside the product, here's one that I think you might like. We're working on an accelerated timeline direct export tool, which is going to be a way to do sort of foreground export to QuickTime.movs using the internal caching and playback engine of Hiero and Nuke Studio to produce those all important editorial deliveries or viewing copies much faster than we can today. So that's an interesting project that we're hoping we'll see soon, and yeah, should really improve quick exports. Another project that we've been working on is what we call the multi-channel aware timeline, and this is bringing the multi that is the multi-channel awareness of Nuke into your timeline environment. What does that mean? Well, it would mean that your soft effects are now able to understand channels. So whilst there's just one clip on the timeline there, it might be packed with 20 or 30 layers in a multi-channel EXR. This would allow us to not just preview those layers or channels, but be able to use them. So you could adjust the AO pass and then use that adjusted AO pass to change the look of your render if you wanted. This would just be a way of previewing stylization. Everything we build in the timeline is translatable into the Nuke node graph. So those two soft effects become two nodes, and it can get quite complex. You might decide to to call out one of our new soft effects here, which is a hue correct, to adjust this color in the robot's outfit. But of course, if that spills into other areas of the image, you might want to use a holdout matte or an RGB matte to limit the effect of that and do a clean adjustment. That'd be a simple example. Also, with multi-channel aware soft effects, you could go and grab one of your render passes and actually maybe adjust that, which would then could be graded, adjusted. But we also have blink script in the timeline. That means that you could bring in a shape or an adjustment effect to then regionalize that to just one specific part of your image. A way to preview lighting changes, all in the editorial workflow. So you could fold that underneath the dissolve. Just multi-channel aware timeline. There it is. The name works. Reviewing this one, we've got these mask-enabled soft effects, like you have in the node graph. We're bringing that functionality to grade, color correct, lens distort, being able to lens distort all of your channels if you want. You also be able to put in blink scripts that can have multiple inputs. So, for example, a blink script that uses RGB but also needs to see motion vectors or normals to create its effect would now be possible within the timeline as well as the node graph. And of course, we could get the speed and the drag and drop, copy and paste across lots of shots timeline thing going on. We added a blur and an erode soft effect that would be good ways of manipulating maybe existing matte channels or depth channels or who knows what that you want to just treat as part of your soft effects stack to get cool creative intent, to then maybe copy those nodes over to the node graph, send them off to an artist to say, this is the trick that I want you to do. This is the stylization technique or whatever it is. So that's multi-channel aware timeline. One more thing, something that we're working on, a way to be able to look at a lot of shots at once in your viewport as you work maybe on a review timeline playlist coming from Flow. We think that we know that having that 30,000 foot view is a challenge, especially when you have hundreds of items in your timeline. This would be a way to be able to put them on a grid, and rather than just sort of play through a storyboard here, this would be more like a way to compare and analyze similar shots. So if you picked several shots that were of the same character, let's say, or similar, you could then scrub them all and look at all those shots on frame 47, scroll back to frame 20, and so on. And that's a way of being able to do detailed review and comparison right there in your timeline view. So it doesn't have to be all the pieces in the timeline. It could just be a selection of shots that you would get. This is actually just a mock-up of the kind of experience of you just picking 5 clips that you want to analyze and then save that as a sheet or a grid to be able to recall or just scrub through if possible, and certainly play up to the limit of the hardware. We're not sure exactly what that is yet. It'll depend on different machines, but this sort of tool, a visual comparison tool, is something we think people need as part of their review experience. All right, so I think that brings us just about to the end of our presentation. If you'd like to test Nuke 16, please have a look at the link that will be in the description here of this video. We think this beta will be available soon. We'd love for you to test it and get your feedback. All right, with that said, thank you so much for listening. This has been the Timeline Tools YouTube Live.